Cool. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Natasha and I've been talking about today and how we can best help you. Webinars, you know, we're all Zoom people these days. These are Microsoft Team people these days. We're doing all our teaching and training on this, you know, and I don't like it. To be honest with you, I like face-to-face. I like to have interaction with people. We do our workshops with small groups, 10, 20 people. We have a lot of give and take, and we do a bit in class, and we do go to the field, we do projects, and we come back. And so it's very interactive, and I find this very constraining. But, you know, we have a pandemic and it is what it is. So we do our best. So we'll try to make this interactive as possible. I want to ask you at any point for questions. I did send out the document to you to read for a couple weeks ago through Natasha, this one here, the Safe Growth Creating Safety and Sustainability through Community Building and Urban Design. This was a monograph I did about 10 years ago with a group called the Local Initiative Support Corporation, who are a social development bank who help build things like affordable housing and development. And they had a big program about community partnership at the time. And Safe Growth is not a police community program. It's not a police program at all, in fact, but they were doing a program on that. So they wanted to build an information booklet. And I just found it so useful. It had so many of the concepts in it. I thought you'd benefit from reading that. We can talk a bit about that in a minute. So we have that. And then I've got some slides I want to show you, some examples so you see how it looks. And then I thought we'd do a bit of a group project, group exercise with each other. And Tasha's going to help us organize that. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the 2 hours, and we'll probably take a bio break halfway through because sitting for these things can be, you know, tedious if you can't get up. So we'll do a short bio break halfway through. And then at the end, we've got an email, which Natasha, we sent that out just before the class, didn't we? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
An attachment.
An attachment, right. Okay, so, and you should have that in your emails right now. We're not going to need it right now. We'll need it at the end of the class. So just hang on to it for the time being. Maybe at the break, you can go to your email and pull it up and look at it. And that's what you're going to use. That's kind of a survey protocol instrument that you can use to diagnose your site and your project that you want to look at, and use this as kind of your guidepost. So it's kind of an easy roadmap for you. And so the first part of this webinar will explain the concepts, and the last part will show you how you use this and how it applies. So that's the agenda. That's the roadmap for today. I'm sorry, Natasha, I should have made a roadmap up there. You told me to do that and I totally forgot. I'm sorry. It's pandemic brain. So let me start by, first of all, I got a lot of faces here. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Any initial questions or any expectations you'd want to share with me? I'm going to, if you could just put your hand up or whatever, or just start speaking, I'd love to hear from you. So I'll open the floor, please.
In the meantime, I have a poll just to gauge the general knowledge of CPTED. So I'm going to launch that. And in the meantime, feel free to add comments, expectations, things you want to learn about in the chat box, or unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, let's take a moment and do the poll first, because I think that's pretty cool.
You guys are such a responsive group.
Nice.
This is great.
Okie dokie. We have 16 of 19. And it looks like, wow, okay.
Yeah, so we have
17 and 19.
Here, I can end it and show people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have one person who's super familiar with CPTED, about a 50-50 split of none / I did the pre-reading, or
yeah.
I have a little bit of background.
Right. So most people have very little, but some have some knowledge. Let's start with that then. Let's start with the second category. I have some background in CPTED, some knowledge. Whoever answered that, could I get some feedback about you? What do you know about CPTED and where did you learn it? So who were one of the people who answered, I have some knowledge? Could you put your hand up? Let's start with Shannon. Shannon, why don't you unmute there? So what knowledge do you have of CPTED, Shannon?
It's totally anecdotal. I didn't realize I had knowledge about it until I read the document that was provided ahead of this. And I was like, oh yeah, I've learned that putting murals or art in windows helps deter graffiti.
Yeah.
I also run community programming in a public park in Santa Fe and have found that filling the park full of second graders does a lot to deter criminal activity, sometimes more than even a police camera or other efforts. So totally anecdotal.
A lot more actually when it comes down to activities in the space. Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Yeah. And it does sound commonsensical when you read it. You go, well, it makes sense that it would happen that way. And except it has kind of a commonsensical side to it, but it's also not as common as we think. Some of the strategies, it's like if we thought if they were so common, how come we're not doing them more often? So it does have a commonsensical piece to it, but there's kind of a twist in there. So, okay. Who else noted that they have some background in CPTED? Put your hand up so we can see you, please. Matt, I can see you there. So Matt, what's your background in it?
So I actually have a master's in public health, and my emphasis was on the impact of the built environment and health. So I took some classes in community development and urban planning at UC Denver, and we actually talked about CPTED in my intro to community development and urban planning class.
You took a public health class at UC Denver, and they talked about CPTED here in Denver?
Yeah, so our professor had some intro to it, and so brought it up in one of the classes.
Oh, really? Well,
Yep.
that's a shock to me because I've been here 5 years and can't find anybody who talks about CPTED.
Yeah, not that it's been implemented in Denver, but
Yeah.
that we talked about it in the actual class is kind of
Yeah.
like part of that. Yep.
Typically what happens a lot of times is they give it to the cops, and the cops have a crime prevention person who goes out and does CPTED surveys, which I did 35 years ago, which is a ridiculous way to do this model because it doesn't work. It's the outside coming in, doing it to us, not for us, not with us. So we no longer promote that model at all, but that's the old way of doing CPTED. What we're going to talk about today is kind of the new way to do it. So more collaborative. Okay, cool. Anybody else here who's got some background in CPTED? Lila in Bozeman.
Hi, sorry, I had to miss a section of the meeting. I got a call I thought was going to be important, and of course it wasn't. But my experience was also for a graduate course in urban planning. We were student consultants for the Downtown Durham Business Improvement District on how they could help activate the space. So our report was on how to use CPTED principles for that.
And did you adopt some CPTED in the area, and did it work?
I believe that they implemented some of the strategies that we recommended, but I didn't stay for the follow-up.
Really?
A lot of just kind of how to activate the space. And Durham's changed a lot since then, so I would guess that the space has been activated regardless of,
Yeah, which happens a lot of times. I mean, we do development work with the LISCA organization, and they build things. They build new malls, and they do build new apartment complexes and new parks. And just the very active development activates the area. That helps right in itself. And you don't need CPTED per se, but CPTED really helps you steer in the right direction if you do it properly. Because CPTED can be done really poorly. It can be done, in a way that actually excludes people if you do it the wrong way, and excludes certain groups, homeless people and so forth. So it's got to be done right, and you have to have people who have read up on it and understand it. And we have a certification program, which I'll talk to you about later. So it can go both ways. It's like, it's like anything. It's like aspirin, I mean, aspirin can cure headaches, but if you take too much, it'll give you ulcers, so it's like, so the tool itself is neutral. It's how it's used that matters. So that's cool. Anybody else have any background or exposure to CPTED aside from the reading? Looking for the faces here. Nope. Okay. Cool. All right. So let me give you some introduction, and if you wouldn't mind, I know it's being recorded, but it may also be useful to get a pen and paper out and take some notes, because I'm going to give you some websites that may be helpful to you. So if you would mind, I will share this screen for a moment, like this, and I will open up a PowerPoint slide for you, which looks like that. So I'm hoping you can all see this. On your screen should be a PowerPoint slide that says safegrowth.org, and it has a front page of a website, and that is in fact a website, and that is the website I would like you to jot down, if you wouldn't mind, please, if you haven't seen it already. Safegrowth.org. And CPTED is one of many strategies we use. We use others as well, which we won't get into today, but inside there, the pull down menus, about, resources, blogs, so forth, are lots of tools in there. As we get into this, if you come to the point where you want some extra resources, in fact, I may do that later, Natasha. We'll send out the password for folks to get into the website. As a matter of fact, I never remember the password. It's my website, so that's that I am. But we'll send it. We'll send the password out to you. I think it's safe growth, capital S, capital G, safe growth dot the number 2 and then capital D and then AY. So Safe Growth Today is I believe what it is. Safe Growth with capital S, capital G, and then 2, the number 2, and then D, capital DAY. I think that's what it is. But we'll send it out again later. You don't need it for today anyway. But there's lots of resources on there. I know you have reports you're already working on or that you're going to be working on. We have reports also. Natasha, I believe we sent out a sample report to the folks, didn't we?
No, we haven't sent out a sample, but we certainly can. It's very well aligned with what you guys are doing for assessment and then identifying goals and next steps to reach those goals.
Okay. Well, on the website where it says resources, there's a pull-down menu we won't go to now, but in resources there are sample reports, how to rate a report, how to set up a Venn diagram, how to set up, a Gantt chart to time and do your scheduling, all the technical things which you can get on there. So we'll get you the password. You can go into the site and get that stuff for you. So there's tons of resources there. There's another one which I didn't put up here, which I should have, and I'll just read it to you. And it's the website of the International SEPTED Association. Of course, SEPTED, Crime Prevention through Environmental Design, and SEPTED is CPTED. And so it's basically www.septed.net. Or .org, sorry. And if you go in there, it's basically an international nonprofit organization which has hundreds of members in dozens of countries. And I was one of the co-founders of that back in the 90s because we were concerned about the quality of SEPTED implementation and SEPTED consulting, that a lot of it was being done improperly or at a very superficial level. So we created this nonprofit professional organization to professionalize the field. And it's like all nonprofit professional groups. It has, biannual conferences and websites, and it has a certification program. And what I'd like you to consider at some point, if you decide to continue on this field, is you may want to get yourself certified. And the program, and I'm in the program, so I help set the program, so I can help you with that. So you can email me later and I'll give you the kind of the lowdown on how you get certified. But it's a really great thing to do because you can keep current with what the latest strategies are and some of the great case studies that are going on in other cities and other countries. So I'd recommend the International SEPTED Association as a good resource for you. Okay, so that's your resources for after the class. All right, so safe growth, and the model, the metaphor we use here, and I'm only going to be sort of philosophical at the start here, but I do think this is an important message. The metaphor we use in the Safe Growth is a nonprofit network of people who do this model. I run it through my consulting company, but basically it's a group of 20 people around the world, 15, 20 people around the world who do this and apply the model of implementing new kinds of neighborhood governance. That's what it really is. And the philosophy we have behind it is the tree. And the reason we use the tree is because the tree, well, first of all, we're eco people, so we're always talking about biking and walking and hiking, all the great things, recycling. But beyond that, the tree represents a model for not only understanding problems but responding to them. And the way we do this, we say the tree has 3 parts. I'm simplifying here, obviously. It has the outside leaves, right, of the tree, which is what you see. It looks like the whole tree. You see the leaves. It has the stems and the branches, right, which hold the tree up, right. That's spring out to the right, spring out to the left, and so forth. And then under that is the roots to the tree. And when you look at crime prevention, you have those 3 approaches. You have approaches that are kind of on the surface, right? Approaches that are like cameras, for example. Now, cameras don't arrest anybody. Cameras don't prevent them from becoming, delinquent or from becoming drug addicted. All the cameras do is let you look right, at the scene. Now, we use cameras, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying that they're very narrow strategy. And a lot of communities that have set up cameras have still had crime and said, what's wrong? What's happening here? Well, the reason is because the camera is only a very superficial strategy, right? And there are many prevention strategies that are superficial. But like the leaves on the tree, they fall off every year. And a lot of these superficial strategies aren't, they don't last. Some of them don't get funded. Some of them, the cameras break down, and so on and so forth. So you've got to do more than that. So then there's the prevention strategies that are like the branches of the tree that hold it up, that are more solid, but they're not the tree, because you can break a branch off and the tree still functions just fine. But there are strategies in prevention that are branch like, that are get more to the root of what's going on. Programs, maybe getting folks to work together on a neighborhood watch, for example, so they can work together, or maybe they have a program in the schools, for kids and things like that. So there are lots of good social programs that have some impact. Many don't, some do, but really what we aim for in Safe Growth is to do not just the leaves on the tree, not just the branches, but the roots, the root causes of why these things start in the first place. And our belief in Safe Growth is that the crime happens in the neighborhood. It happens at a neighborhood level, and it happens on a street level, it happens at a family level, it happens at a school level, and that's where you need to solve it. So our strategies are rebuilding neighborhoods, rebuilding the schools from the bottom up. Strategy that dig at the roots of the problem. We don't want to just hack at the branches, we want to dig at the roots. So that's our philosophy. We want to do things, and the leaf strategies, the superficial strategies, they're almost always done to people by others from the outside. The police have a block watch, neighborhood watch program. They'll give you the signs, they'll give you stuff, and then you sort of do it, but you may not. But they're the ones delivering it. Well, in the Safe Growth program, we're developing the programs ourselves. They're done with and by the residents, with and by the community, in partnership with others. So it's a 2 at the top, 4 in the middle, and by at the bottom strategy, 2, 4, by. We work in the branches, but we dig at the roots. So our philosophy is always to work with people, always to work collaboratively, always to work in teams in the neighborhood level. So that's our philosophy. That's our approach. So having said that, then the question then becomes, okay, that's your approach. How do you do it? What do you do? What are the tactics? And by now, if you read the document, that some of our tactics have to do with urban design and architecture and crime prevention through urban design, or CPTED. And in Safe Growth, we use a whole bunch. Here's the three we're going to talk about today. CPTED 1, basic CPTED, which you read in the book. Advanced CPTED on the right, which is strategies that are more recent to do with the geography of crime and things like that. And then CPTED 2, or second generation CPTED, which are the social things that dig at the roots. So all 3 of those fit together. We'll talk about 2 of them today, but there's all kinds of strategies in each one of those that you can use to tackle crime. So the question then is, okay, so what is first generation CPTED? Well, by now it has 4 strategies in basic CPTED, as it was started in the 60s and 70s by people like Jane Jacobs, who wrote her book on city planning back in the early 60s. And that was followed up by some studies in the mid 60s and the late 60s and some doctoral work, and it led to a couple of writers writing this up as an actual document. One was called Defensible Space, which is by an architect named Oscar Newman in New York City, and the other was a book called Crime Prevention through Environmental Design by the American Society of Criminology chairperson, who's a criminologist at Florida State University. His name is C. Ray Jeffrey. And when I taught at Florida State, C. Ray Jeffrey his office was right across the hall, and he was retired then, but he used to go out for coffees and dinners and whatnot. And he told me the early theories and the early concepts behind what CPTED was supposed to do. So I learned a lot about that. And those early days led to 4 basic strategies, 4 concepts. The first one is territory, or you can't do that here, that people take ownership of an area. People can do what Oscar Newman used to say, defend their own space, by having some kind of a control over it, by having benches out when Starbucks puts tables and chairs on the sidewalk, the public sidewalk, and people go outside. The sidewalk is not owned by the city, it's not owned by Starbucks, but they claim that space, territorial claim of that space. And that's a territorial strategy. That's the first one. The second one is image and maintenance by cleaning it and managing it. Some folks confuse this with what happened in New York City called the broken window theory, but it's actually not the same at all. It's a totally different theory. That was broken windows developed 20 years after this. And so this concept is based on the idea that by cleaning areas, graffiti removal, I heard some comments about graffiti earlier, those kinds of things can have an impact on crime. That's true. They don't stop crime, but they have an impact. And so that's kind of like an idea. And then the other two strategies in first generation are natural surveillance. We see you, there's eyes on the street, what Jane Jacobs called the eyes on the street. And in natural surveillance, it said the word natural is important because there's ways you can put eyes on the street. You can have cameras, for example, which is mechanical surveillance. It's not electronic, it's not natural, it's mechanical. And as in some areas, maybe you do want cameras, maybe in an underground parking lot, maybe there's nobody there. But in most situations, we always aim to have it natural rather than mechanical. Or even organized, like patrols and citizen patrols. If you can make it natural, you're better off because it's probably less money and it lasts longer. So natural surveillance is a whole thing, and there's many ways to do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And finally, access controls. That is helping folks take ownership of an area using some natural access controls. The old standbys were like fences and walls and stuff like that, but there are many more attractive and aesthetic and subtle ways to do access control by landscaping and hedging and shrubbery and flowers and things like that. So those are the basics. Those are the four basic simple ones. And then the second generation, and we'll skip over the advanced ones for now. The second generation is the social strategies that myself and my colleague Gerard Cleveland from Australia today, he lives in Australia, he and I developed this in 1997 as a response to making it more social, to be able to dig at the roots. And there's 4 strategies in that. Social cohesion, getting folks to work together is the core of all those. And then we have others around there that help us do that by using cultural strategies like murals and festivals and activities, getting kids in the park. I think we heard that earlier. Community culture is a big part of that. Connectivity is getting folks to work together in neighborhoods, getting governments to work, getting partners to work, getting police to work, partnering together. And the last one, which actually isn't up there, I should have corrected the slide before I started today. I was negligent. I apologize for that. But it's actually not neighborhood culture, it's capacity. Capacity is a little more complex, and we'll talk about that later. But basically, capacity says too much of one thing can go the wrong way in a neighborhood. So if you have a street in which there are pawn shops, or porn shops, or activities that draw a certain clientele, it's going to be you're going to draw certain kinds of activities to that. And if you put a children's play area across the street, it's probably not a good idea. So these are planning concepts about how you balance a neighborhood. Jane Jacobs used to talk about how balancing a neighborhood with different kinds of people. So it's not all just one group taking over. So you have to run a gauntlet between teenagers, for example, that you're balancing it. So capacity is like tipping points. So it's a way to balance the neighborhood, and it has particular relevance to what you're doing with walking to parks and stuff like that, because walkways walk past these land uses, and the land uses can detract, or they can to the safety of people, or they can add to the safety of people. And by looking at capacity, you have a better way of enhancing safety. All right, so there's a snapshot of first generation and second generation basic CPTED. So having said that, what I'd like to do now, my computer would work, is ask the question, so how does CPTED actually work? And here's what I'd like to do. I would like to work with my friend Natasha, who is going to break you into groups, and we're going to have you talk to some folks in your group about one of those 8 strategies. So first gen had the 4: access, surveillance, and territory and image. And second gen had cohesion, capacity, connectivity, and tipping points, culture. And so there's 8 strategies there. And each one of those strategies are available to you when you do your work. You may not use all 8, you may only use 2 or 3, but you need to know that all 8 may apply, because having a good toolbox, a solid toolbox, will allow you to come up with strategies that are very robust. So what I want to do is I want to divide the class into 8 groups and put people from different groups into each of the 8 groups. And what I want you to do when you get to your group, I'll assign you the topic. I want you to go take your document out, and I want you to go to the section in here about your topic, and I want you to read it over, and I want you to have a brief discussion among your team. So for example, if you have, let me have a look here. Here's the page number, page 4. And it says, on the left-hand side, it's all first-generation strategies. So it says, if you get territoriality, there's one paragraph on territoriality. So if you get territoriality, open to that page, read that paragraph, and have a discussion among your team about what that means, how you might use it, what are the strategies. And then what we're going to do is when we come back to the groups, we're going to ask you to report back to us and explain to us and teach us what is territoriality. And so that'll be your job. And if you're in the access control group, you'll do the same thing, read this over and so forth. And if you're in the image group, same thing. If you're in the natural